We're making progress in our mission to get to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. The vast change in landscape and vegetation means we're leaving behind the moorland and we're entering the alpine desert. But progress is getting much harder. Summiting the world's tallest freestanding mountain is neither quick nor easy, especially with a film crew tagging along and a mountain throwing some extremely foul weather down at us.
We have just crossed 4,000 meters, which is pretty cool. Let's see, actually now it's slightly higher than that. It's 4,010. Not many places higher than that. Mount Meru right next door, well, somewhere in the mist, is about 4,600. So by the time we get to Lao, we'll be at that height. But the thing is, as much as this is an interesting achievement, we now just have another 2,000 to go. Go figure. Onwards then.
The higher we get, the greater our chances of suffering from altitude sickness. Earlier in our climb, I got to see a special item in our equipment that could mean the difference between life and death in an emergency. One of the very real concerns and the very real risks of an expedition like this is altitude sickness. Crudely put, if you ascend too high, too quickly, your body just doesn't have any time to adapt to the fact that the oxygen levels become much, much thinner the higher you go, and at 5,900 meters there's very little oxygen. The easiest and simplest way of dealing with altitude sickness is just really to get whoever's suffering from it down the mountain as fast as possible. But in case that isn't possible, that's where this then comes in. It's a gammo bag. Think of it really as a pressurized canister. I could tell you what it does, but it's a lot easier for me to just actually show you. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, I'm the victim here. I've got altitude sickness, and our guide here, Joel, needs to take emergency measures as soon as possible. Gets me into the bag, make sure it's all snug and tight, and then after that, he locks it up.
Basically, it's a sealed chamber. What you're hearing now is oxygen being pumped, or rather air being pumped into the bag. And we therefore simulate bringing the victim down to, say, sea level. The rate at which this is continuing is actually going to bring me down to a level much, much lower than Moshi Town, where we started our climb. That's about 800 meters above sea level. And by the time this is done, we'll be much, much closer to zero.
Once this is inflated and it's up to pressure, it's actually quite comfortable. The pressure does build up fairly rapidly. So in an emergency, this is extraordinarily handy. My one hope, however, is that we just don't have to use this in the duration of this entire climb, because it would really have to be an emergency. So, one demonstration done, and hopefully this is the last time we see this.
Back on the trail, the cold and the rapidly changing weather makes for tough going. Before the use of tents and huts, climbers of Kilimanjaro used to spend the night in one of its many caves, which also happened to provide excellent shelter from the rain. We are now out of the heath and moorlands. We are now effectively in the alpine desert. When you think of desert, obviously it's supposed to be hot and dry and dusty. Obviously not the case here. The crew decided to take a bit of a break from the rain and the mist and the cold. There's a lot of it up here. And of course, at the same time, when you do take a break out here, you have to refuel. Very important. The saturating weather does not stop, and the team doesn't either. We have to make it to Lava Tower in good time if we are to get to our camp at the base of the treacherous western breach by nightfall. I have to push myself The altitude and the conditions mean my head is down and I barely notice the looming presence of Lava Tower in the mist ahead. The tower is a huge stack of cooled and hardened lava that dominates the landscape. It's a volcanic plug, effectively corking the vent that created it. It's a stunning setting for a breather, but suddenly there's bad news from our guides about our plan to go up the western breach.
Impossible.
It's impossible to go there.
Let me explain what's going on here. Tom, our producer, and of course Joel, one of our guides. Our original plan was to move from here, the Lava Tower camp, and then head up there to the Aru Glacier, and then finally use the western breach. It's the most challenging way up the mountain. But the weather's been particularly bad. It's raining. We've actually come in a bank of sleet to this particular camp. And Joel's telling us that simply isn't safe. He's recounting incidents in 2002 where a porter died. In fact, sometime in September, October, a tourist also died going up the exact same route. So, yeah, we'll have to change our plan.
We crack on and leave behind the imposing wall of rock and ice. The route to the Barranco camp actually now takes us downhill. And although it's now a race against time, the beauty of the valley we descend through isn't lost on us. It is a long and punishingly fast descent into camp. I am in agony. My back simply gave up and my head is swimming. It's to my tent with the worst fears going through my mind. This really could be the end of my journey. If nothing changes by morning, the team will have to continue up without me.